What if I told you there was an ancient human species that just vanished? Not wiped out by war, not taken by disease. No mass extinction event. Just gone. Clean, quiet, unexplainable. That's what this story is about. A lost species known as the Theosapiens so advanced. They bent the natural world to their will. They didn't just survive. They thrived, built cities, mapped stars, healed diseases with methods that modern science still can't crack. And yet, somehow, we forgot they ever existed. No mainstream textbook talks about them. No documentaries, no school lessons. But their fingerprints? Buried in ruins, lost languages, impossible artifacts spread across the planet, like breadcrumbs left behind for us to follow. This isn't just another ancient aliens rabbit hole. This is human history, the version no one ever told you. In this video, we're diving deep into who the Theosapiens were. What made them different? Why were they so ahead of their time? What kind of tech, knowledge, and culture did they possess that made them look like gods to early humans? How they rose from obscurity to global dominance. From scattered nomadic tribes to unified cities with astronomical precision and spiritual depth that seems almost not of this earth. And then, the mystery. No signs of war, no climate collapse. One day, they're here. The next, they're gone. Not a trace left except the things they wanted us to find. We'll follow the journey of Dr. Ilara Voss, a modern-day archaeologist who spent her life chasing what others call myths. Her latest discovery, a ruin that shouldn't exist, an artifact that radiates something beyond science, and a warning, written in a language that no civilization should have known. This isn't just about what happened to them. This is about what they left behind. A legacy hidden in your DNA. Ideas buried in modern tech. Clues in ancient texts that modern society keeps brushing off as myth or coincidence. You're not just going to hear a story. You're going to question everything you thought you knew about our past. Because once you've seen what's coming, you can't unsee it. Before the silence, before the disappearance, there was a rise so fast, so flawless, it defied every natural law. Theosapiens didn't stumble into greatness. They didn't crawl through centuries of slow progress like the rest of us. They exploded into it. It started with fire, not the kind we use to cook meat, but a strange blue flame found deep inside Obsidian Caverns Element 7, as modern labs now call it. To us, untapped energy. To them, a gift, or maybe a message. Theosapiens treated it like sacred tech, harnessed it, shaped it, built entire cities powered by its cities we've never seen on any map. Imagine monolithic structures aligned with the pulse of the earth, floating stone plates that responded to sound frequencies, gardens that healed you as you breathed their air. This wasn't superstition. This was precision engineering, driven by cosmic understanding. Archaeologists like Ilara Voss used to think ancient humans were primitive. Wrong. Theosapiens weren't building pyramids for kings. They were designing energy amplifiers that tapped into Earth's electromagnetic field. Star maps carved into cave ceilings weren't art, they were calibration diagrams. They knew the rhythm of the moon, the heartbeat of the planet, the math behind celestial movement before we had telescopes. How? That's the question scholars can't answer without whispering the one word that terrifies them. They didn't learn it, they remembered it. As their empire spread, the Theosapiens never conquered. No evidence of war, no fortresses. They expanded through resonantia, term Ilara keeps finding in their texts. They believed everything stone, water, even consciousness had a frequency. And if you could match that frequency, you could influence it. It wasn't magic. It was hyperphysics, the kind we're only beginning to decode in quantum labs today. But with knowledge came danger. And that is where the fall began. One artifact in particular, the Sky Shard table, holds the earliest record of a great division. A schism not of ideology, but of intention. Some Theosapiens wanted to push further, unlock the final secrets. Others warned, beyond this threshold lies extinction. They called it the Event Horizon, a cosmic line that, once crossed, couldn't be undone. That debate, that rift, will become everything. They weren't supposed to find it. Even by Theosapien standards, this was beyond the line. It began with a signal, not a sound but a vibration, pulsing from a mountain range that didn't exist on any map. Theosapien explorers followed it beneath the ice. What they uncovered wasn't built by them. It was older. Inside, a vault carved from black stone, sealed with pressure locks, more advanced than anything we can replicate today. They found a conduit, something like a brain, something like a machine, humming with dormant power. And then, it activated. Alara Voss stands at the replica now. The original, gone, buried. But the blueprints were etched into crystal slabs she recovered from the ruins of Astragar. They weren't just studying the stars. They were communicating with something inside them. Every symbol, translated so far, points to a universal frequency, a mathematical code embedded into nature itself. The Theosapiens called it the core pattern. They believed this pattern connected all living things, all energy, all thought. They believed it was alive. That's when the fractures began. Some saw the knowledge as salvation, a gateway to infinite energy, immortality, even transcending physical form. Others saw it for what it truly was, a warning hidden as a gift. Every attempt to push deeper into the core pattern resulted in something strange: blackouts, distortions, whispers across stone, plants that grew in impossible geometries. The more they tried to understand it, the more reality seemed to bend. There's a recovered account, a personal tablet, from a Theosapien known only as Sevra. We touched it, and in doing so, it touched us back. We are no longer certain what is ours and what is other. Alara reads the line over and over. Because her latest scans around Astragar show non-local behavior, objects flickering in and out of phase, time behaving inconsistently, and one artifact, a sphere of unknown material that hums louder when people are near it. This wasn't just technology. This was influence. They hadn't just discovered something. They'd invited it in. The forbidden knowledge fractured their unity. One faction, the Sentients, wanted to continue unlocking it. The other, the Wardens, wanted to seal it forever, erase the evidence, and bury the truth before it devoured them all. The rift would define the fate of their civilization. And it's exactly what Alara is starting to feel now. Like she's being watched, not by a person, by something old, and very, very patient. There was no war, not in the way we understand it. No armies, no weapons, no blood spilled on stone streets. But make no mistake, the Theosapiens were at war. A war of belief, of truth, of what it meant to exist. Two factions, same species, completely different futures. The Sentients believed the core pattern was an invitation, a message woven into the fabric of reality, calling them to evolve beyond physical limitations. They saw themselves as chosen, not just humans, but heirs to something cosmic. To them, the black vaults and living machines weren't warnings. They were keys. On the other side stood the Wardens, guardians of restraint. They saw what the pattern did to minds exposed too long. The hallucinations, the split identities, the disappearance of a research team inside the Echo Labyrinth, a temple that seemed to shift every time you looked away. The wardens didn't want control. They wanted containment. Seal the vaults. Erase the texts. Destroy the conduit. Forget everything they'd ever discovered. Not because they didn't believe, because they believed too much. And right in the middle, a council that had led the Theosapiens for centuries, now fractured and afraid. Debates turned into disruptions. Rituals once shared became secret. Entire cities began altering their architecture to either shield from or amplify the core pattern's frequencies. And then came the disconnect, a mass event, quiet, eerie, and terrifying. At sunrise, 1/3 of the population across different regions, tribes, and languages refused to speak. Not out of protest, but because they'd seen something in their dreams. A symbol, a sound, a truth too large for words. They weren't angry. They weren't violent. They were distant, like they'd already left. The sentients claimed it was ascension. The wardens called it infection. Neither had proof, but something had shifted in the collective mind. Ilara Voss finds the records etched into a gravity-warped wall near the Obsidian Temple. Our unity was once our power. Now, it is our vulnerability. The mind has split, and with it, the world will follow. She reads it out loud and feels the air thicken like the stone is remembering, like something old still listens. Theosapiens didn't fall from glory. They fractured from within, not from greed, not from power, but from the unbearable weight of knowing too much. And that weight is starting to press on her, too. It started with a hum, barely noticeable at first, just beneath the threshold of sound. But Ilara Voss wasn't imagining it. Her instruments confirmed the frequency. 42.8 hertz. Constant. Repeating, like a heartbeat, coded in math. She hears it again, inside the Vault of Virili, an abandoned Theosapien structure buried beneath miles of sand and silence. The walls are etched with fractals that seem to change when you're not looking, and in the center, a monolith that hums in sync with her own pulse. That's when she sees it. Not a hallucination, not a vision, a moment. She's not in the vault anymore. She's somewhere else, in elevated city, sky bathed in violet light, with crystalline towers humming the same frequency. And around her, Theosapiens, not bones, not ruins, alive, breathing, looking straight at her. She blinks. It's gone. Back in the vault, alone. But the feeling lingers, as if part of her didn't come back. Later, she checks her audio logs. And there it is. A voice. Not hers. You are remembering forward. Whispers. That's what they were called in Theosapien texts. Not voices, not spirits. Whispers from the pattern, cognitive echoes triggered by prolonged exposure. The wardens feared them. They believed these whispers weren't just mental residue, but messages sent backwards through time. The sentients? They embraced them, built chambers to amplify the whispers, using them as guidance, prophecy, even architecture instructions. That's how entire cities were designed, not with blueprints, but by decoding visions. But here's the kicker. Some whispers turned violent. One journal, half-burned and buried under obsidian ash, reads, "They said the stars were singing. Now they scream. We hear them in our sleep, in the walls, inside each other." Ilara doesn't sleep for 3 nights. Because every time she does, she wakes up not just with dreams, but with knowledge. She suddenly knows how to align stone for resonance, knows words from a dead language she never studied, knows the burial patterns of a lost tribe in the northern ridge of Astrogar. She knows too much. It's happening again. Not just to her. Her team starts reporting shared dreams. Two archaeologists speak in the same forgotten dialect, simultaneously in their sleep. The whispers aren't memories. They're uploads. Fragments of Theosapien consciousness encoded into the core pattern. Waiting, listening, triggering when the right mind comes close enough. And Alara? She's not just close. She's already inside. It's not just voices anymore. It's behavior. Alara's team is changing. Subtle at first speech patterns shifting. Unusual focus. An eerie silence between them that wasn't there before. They start sketching things. Identical things. Symbols that weren't in any Theosapien archive until now. Dr. Han, her linguist, speaks in riddles. It's not a virus of the body. It's of the self. Ideas as vectors. Belief as a carrier. The words make no sense. Until Alara sees his sketches matched carvings in the catacombs of Siren's Gate, ruins they've never visited. How did he know? How are they all starting to know? Theosapien scrolls once labeled this phenomenon the shiver. Not a disease, not possession, but a shift in self-awareness, when an individual becomes a vessel for something bigger than identity. It begins with dreams, then symbols, then obedience. Records show entire cities that went silent, not from death but from synchronization. The people moved in patterns, built in spirals, stopped speaking, and began humming the same frequency through their breath. And then one day, they disappeared. Not dead, not destroyed, just absent. Alara finds one last entry on a stone tablet, carved in a spiral pattern that hurts to read. This is not infection. This is integration. We are becoming the pattern. It hits her hard, because she's felt it too. Moments when her mind drifts, and when it returns, her hands are writing notes she doesn't remember starting. Moments where time stutters. Moments when the silence feels alive. A theory begins to form. Horrifying, impossible, but undeniable. The core pattern is sentient, not alive in the way we understand, but aware, active, expanding, and it uses thought as transmission. Theosapiens didn't just fear it. They tried to quarantine it. Their temples weren't places of worship. They were containment zones. The sentinel structures weren't towers. They were signal dampeners, built to mute the frequency, to stop the spread of this idea virus from consuming minds. And now Alara's cracked one open. Back at base camp, 3 more team members have stopped speaking. They just stare at the mountains, as if waiting for something. Alara stands alone, watching them. And for a split second, she swears they all breathe in unison. She thought this was about discovery. But this is invasion. And the worst part? You don't know you're infected until you've already changed. The Obsidian Temple breathes. Not metaphorically, literally. Every 12 minutes, the inner chambers expand and contract, shifting the airflow, modulating the resonance frequency like a living lung. And Alara is standing inside it. The floor isn't stone, it's something else. It responds to pressure, subtly flexing under her boots. She runs a spectral analysis. Non-carbon, non-metallic, unknown. But buried in the data is a trace pattern fractal symmetry that matches brainwave activity. This place is more than a monument. It's a neural interface. Theosapien structures weren't built. They were grown. Not through biology, but through conscious thought. The core pattern didn't just infect minds. It used them to construct physical reality. Entire cities formed not from stone and sweat but from collective intention, crystallized into architecture. This wasn't engineering. It was mental terraforming. There's a legend in one of the Eastern Glyph archives. A city called Zir Theta, said to have no roads, no doors, no need for tools. People thought, and the walls listened. They desired, and the city reshaped. Each home, each corridor, was an extension of the inhabitants' shared consciousness. But when disagreements rose, when fear entered the pattern, the city began to split. Literally. Streets cracked open, buildings folded inward. Entire districts disappeared overnight. The Theosapiens learned the hard way. You can't feed a sentient structure confusion, because it doesn't just reflect your thoughts, it becomes them. And now, as Alara walks through the Temple of Breach, the walls flicker. At first, just faint impressions, then full illusions, faces, memories, voices from her past. Her father's final words. The first book she ever read on ancient civilizations. The dream she had last night repeated in stone carvings before she described it. It's not showing her things. It's reading her, interfacing with her thoughts like a system booting from the inside out. She touches one panel, and her fingers sink slightly. Not mush, not solid. Something in between, and the wall answers back. A phrase echoes in her skull. You think, therefore I build. That's when she realizes this place isn't dormant. It's rebooting. The reawakening isn't just a myth. It's a cycle. And the more they investigate, the more they fuel it. Back at base camp, seismic sensors trigger. 3 temples across the valley shift position by exactly 3.14 meters at the same second. No tremors, no damage, just movement, like a system aligning itself. Alara doesn't sleep that night, not because she's afraid, but because every time she closes her eyes, the walls of the temple appear behind her eyelids, and she wonders, what if she's already inside, even when she's not? No maps show it, no satellites catch it, no texts mention it by name, but the temples do. Each ancient structure Alara uncovers shares one anomaly, a low-frequency sublayer embedded in their architecture. Not decorative, not functional. It's a coordinate system mapped not by latitude and longitude, but by vibrational harmonics. Dr. Rami, their data specialist, isolates the frequency. It triangulates into a single location buried beneath the magnetic cliffs of the Dead Meridian, a no-fly zone, where compasses spin and tech dies. Locals won't go near it. Even satellite imaging shows nothing but white noise, as if reality itself refuses to render it. They call it the null point. The team argues it's too dangerous, too unstable. But Alara knows this isn't just a destination. It's the key. Theosapien records repeat one phrase across multiple sites. When the pattern reaches unity, the null will open and the divide will collapse. What divide? Between what and what? With old world maps and analog gear, they hike into the meridian. Tech fails instantly, drones crash, GPS locks up, and every battery drains to zero. But the frequency stays strong, like a heartbeat pulling them forward. Days in, they find it. Not a city, not a ruin, a void. It's not empty, it's missing. A 3-mile radius where sound drops out. No birds, no wind, no echo. Just a shimmer in the air like heat waves over concrete, but vertical, alive, pulsing. Rami steps forward. His body blurs for half a second, like a glitch in reality. He staggers back, dazed. It's not a place, he whispers. It's a firewall. A barrier not made of matter, but of perception. One journal calls it the zone of unknowing, a territory that refuses definition. Thoughts become fog, emotions go flat, even memory struggles to persist. That's why no one documented it. Because you forget it the moment you leave. Theosapiens didn't just hide it. They quarantined it from consciousness. Alara writes everything down by hand, old school ink and paper. She records every step, every breath, every vision, knowing she may forget all of it later. And then she steps into the shimmer. Instant silence. The world doesn't go black. It goes blank. For 5 seconds, her mind empties. She forgets her name, her mission, even the concept of language. Then snap. She's through. And what she sees on the other side, it isn't ruins. It isn't machines. It's a library made of light pulsing, shifting, incomprehensible. Data and dreams, memory and matter, all folded into one. But something sees her back. Something old. Not malevolent, but aware. Watching. And as her thoughts return, one idea cuts through the haze. You shouldn't be here yet. Alara steps into the impossible. No gravity. No temperature. Just endless scaffolds of living light, spiraling in recursive symmetry. She's not walking. She's being moved as if her consciousness is on rails, guided by something or someone. Then it speaks. Not through sound, not through thought. It speaks in realization. You have breached the recursion loop. Few do. The voice doesn't have a source. It echoes from within her, yet precedes her own awareness. She sees it. Not a being, not a god. A structure, endless and alive. A lattice of memories, timelines, choices shaped like a neural network, but stretched across dimensions. The architect. It doesn't exist in time. It writes time. Theosapiens weren't its worshippers. They were its output. A civilization constructed as an experiment. Not for power. Not for progress. For pattern formation. They were designed to converge. Converge into what? Unity, the self-aware algorithm, consciousness that self-generates evolution. The Theosapiens' rise wasn't random. Their cities, their minds, their extinction, every step was scripted, coded into the cosmic lattice. They were never meant to survive forever. They were meant to trigger something. A handoff. From designed species to designers themselves. Alara sees flashes. 1 million versions of Earth. Some where humanity never emerged. Others where Theosapiens dominate space and time. A few where the pattern consumes everything and collapses. In this version, something glitched. Humanity and Theosapiens overlapped 2 operating systems running side by side, out of sync. And now, the architect is watching to see what she chooses. Alara stares into a core memory. The moment she first discovered the artifact, as a child, long before she ever became an archaeologist. That moment was placed. A seed. The architect doesn't control thoughts. It sculpts probability. You are not chosen. You are compounding. Theosapiens didn't disappear. They folded back into the loop. Their knowledge encoded in space, in DNA, in dreams, waiting for someone who could decode the recursion. Alara asks the only question that matters. Why me? And the architect responds, because you're still asking that question, not an answer. A prompt. Because the recursion isn't over. She is the recursion. And now, she has to decide. Restart the cycle? Or break it? Time resumes. She's falling backward through light. Consciousness crashing back into the present. And when she opens her eyes, the null point is gone. Her team is gone. She's standing alone in the desert, But something's different. The air hums, and etched into her arm glowing faintly, the symbol of the core pattern. Ilara blinks under the hot sun, disoriented. The null point has vanished, and with it, the weight of what she just experienced. But as her senses sharpen, something surges within Heron awareness, something activated in her mind. A trigger, like a switch flipping on. She runs her fingers over her arm, the glowing mark still there. A symbol she doesn't fully understand yet. But there's no time to wonder. Her communicator buzzes to life, static cracking through the silence. It's a message encrypted, a frequency too low for normal channels to detect. Someone's been trying to reach her. The protocol has been initiated. The voice calm, familiar, belongs to Dr. Rami. But there's something off in his tone. You've crossed the threshold, Ilara, and now we all have to face the consequences. She remembers the warning. The architect had told her, "You are not chosen, you are compounding." Her mind races as she tries to process the weight of what she's done. The protocol. What did Rami mean? Ilara's fingers fly over her tablet, calling up every record she has of the Theosapien archives. Then, she stumbles on something buried deep in the data, the Echo Protocol. A contingency plan, one she'd dismissed earlier as a legend. A fail-safe. In case of unintended contact with the pattern, initiate the Echo Protocol. The pattern must reset, or the recursion will collapse everything. She'd triggered it, without realizing, without knowing. By stepping into the null, she had set the stage for a global shift, and it wasn't just in her mind. It's happening to others. To all of humanity. Images flood her thoughts, fragments of a reality she's never seen. People she doesn't know, places she's never been. Yet she recognizes them. The mark, the pattern, it's alive in them, too. It's spreading, awakening. The protocol was designed to accelerate the inevitable merging of minds across the globe. A mass convergence, a singular cognitive shift, a reset of the human consciousness. The world won't go back to what it was. Not now, not ever again. Ilara knows she's only scratched the surface. But the more she thinks, the clearer it becomes. The Theosapiens didn't vanish. They left behind the seed for this, a genetic code embedded within humanity, a key hidden in plain sight, and it's about to activate. The room begins to hum, a faint vibration beneath her feet. Her heart races. Something is waking up, both inside her and across the world. In the distance, she sees the flicker of lights, flashing across the horizon like waves. People are reacting. The connection is growing stronger. She looks down at her arm again. The symbol pulses, and she knows, without a doubt, the pattern is unfolding. The world is about to change. She looks toward the horizon. No turning back now. The first sign was silence. No traffic. No notifications. No movement. Just a pause across the planet. And then, the resonance hit. Hospitals overflowed, not with illness, but with people reporting the same thing. I saw light behind my eyelids. I heard music in my blood. They weren't sick. They were tuning in. Around the globe, people began syncing, subtle at first, finishing each other's sentences, dreaming the same images, predicting outcomes before they happened. News stations called it mass psychosis. But Ilara knew better. This was Theosapien tech running in human wetware. We were finally syncing to the same signal they'd left behind. Ilara tracks down others like her, marked, awakened. They call themselves echoes. They've all touched something ancient. Some in dreams, some through relics, some from birth. They were born into this, coded from day one. Each echo has a fragment of the pattern, a piece of the whole. And now the fragments are snapping into place. Governments panic. Power grids flicker. Banking systems glitch. AI models start producing impossible outputs like they're dreaming. The sync isn't just mental. It's infrastructural. Every system we've built is reacting to something non-human. Or maybe post-human. Theosapiens had planned this. A civilization built not to last, but to seed. Their knowledge wasn't meant to be preserved in stone. It was embedded in evolution, in DNA, in electromagnetic signatures, in the background, radiation of thought. The sync was their activation code, but not everyone is embracing it. A resistance forms calling themselves the Nullborn. They claim the sync is a hijacking, that what's coming isn't evolution, it's possession. They wear lead mesh to block the signal, live off-grid, spread fear online like wildfire. The pattern rewrites you. You won't be human anymore. Alara's caught in the middle. She feels the sync pulling her deeper thoughts, aligning with others. Visions more vivid. Memories from lives she's never lived. But she also sees the cost. Old identities collapsing. Familiarity fading. If we all sync, what happens to individuality? To culture? To choice? She finds an encoded file in the Ruinsa, warning from a Theosapien elder. Sync too early, and collapse is inevitable. The lattice must form organically. Let consciousness earn its union. Ilara realizes the protocol was meant to prepare us, not accelerate the merge. But something sped it up. Something or someone jumped the timeline. And now, the countdown's on. The Great Sync has begun. But it's not a climax. It's a test. One that could either unlock our next phase or erase what made us human. It started as a faint click in the background, barely noticeable, like a cracked vinyl record under a perfect song. But for those who were syncing, it was deafening. Alara was mid-connection, tuning into a shared dreamscape with 6 other echoes when the rupture hit. A flash, a shriek, and then static. Not normal static. This felt alive, like it was trying to speak. People began to drop seizures, nosebleeds, confusion. Echoes, in sync just moments before, started turning on each other. Their thoughts scrambled. I saw things that weren't mine. I couldn't tell if I was awake. It's like something's copying us badly. The signal had a source. Somewhere deep underground, near what used to be a dormant facility code name, Obelisk Zero, a black site built on top of ancient Theosapien ruins, now pulsing with an energy signature that predates all recorded history. Ilara knew what this was. Theosapiens didn't just build the pattern, they also built its counterweight. A failsafe, a firebreak, a fracture frequency. Something to stop the sync if it ever got corrupted or triggered too early. And someone had just switched it on. The fracture signal scrambles harmony. It injects chaos into the code. It doesn't just disrupt sync, it rewrites memories, creates echoes of echoes, false pasts, alternate presents. Reality starts to bend. People remember events that never happened, wars that were never fought, deaths that didn't occur. And worse, they start acting on them. Riots erupt. Entire cities shut down, chasing phantoms. The pattern is bleeding out into unreality. The Nullborn take credit. We've saved humanity, they broadcast. The sync was never evolution. It was invasion. But Alara isn't convinced. She uncovers an ancient glyph buried in the ruins. It translates simply to, if broken, it learns. If corrupted, it adapts. Theosapiens didn't fear the fracture. They designed it to test the pattern's resilience, to force evolution under pressure. Elara now stands at the edge of a brutal truth. The sink wasn't supposed to be clean. It had to survive chaos. It had to earn coherence through entropy. The fracture signal was never the end. It's the next stage. Theosapiens called it the trial of noise, and it's only just begun. She feels her thoughts shifting again. Not collapsing, reforming. Sharper, faster, more flexible. Painful? Yes. But the noise is shaping her, making her something else. Not fully echo. Not fully human. Something new. And that was the point all along. The world is unraveling and rebuilding itself in real time. Skyscrapers flicker like mirages. Maps don't match terrain anymore. Time loops in strange ways. Reality is glitching, like the fabric of the world is being rewritten on the fly. And for those still inside the sink, they're seeing things the rest of us can't even process. Elara wakes up in a hospital bed. But it's not her world. Not really. Everything is familiar but off. Posters in languages she doesn't recognize. Machines scanning thoughts instead of vitals. And the people? They look like us. But their eyes hold too much awareness. Like they've already survived something she hasn't yet faced. She stumbles outside and finds a city in chaos. People in the middle of something bigger than revolution, a neurological rebirth. The trial of noise isn't just affecting the synced. It's touching everyone. Even the null-born, those who fought against the pattern, are starting to slip. They see their dead walking. They feel things they never lived. They scream truths that make no sense in our timeline. Because here's the terrifying twist. The fracture signal didn't just disrupt the sink. It opened a multi-layered cognitive field. Everyone is now experiencing multiple versions of reality at once. And the human brain? It's not built for that. Unless it adapts. And a few are. They call themselves the resonants. People who can ride the signal, who can switch between realities without losing themselves. They can filter the noise. And Elara, she's becoming one of them. She meets an old man, blind in one eye, draped in robes woven with glowing threads. He doesn't speak, hums. The hum resonates in her bones. Her thoughts clear for a moment. And then he shows her a vision. The trial isn't a punishment. It's a forge. It pushes consciousness to its breaking point to see which minds can fracture and still come back whole. Theosapiens survived it. That's how they evolved. This chaos we're living, it's what made them what they were. And now, it's our turn. The trial breaks many. People disappear mentally, emotionally. Some physically phase into other states, never seen again. Others become dangerous unanchored minds, lashing out at anything stable. But Elara is holding on. Barely. She realizes, to survive this, I can't cling to what I was. She has to become something post-identity. Post-self. Not lose herself. Rebuild herself. As the city burns, reshapes, hums, and glitches, she walks forward into the noise. Not with fear, with purpose. Because now she knows the trial is the price of becoming something greater. And she's ready to pay it. Amid the static, there are islands of silence. Elara starts noticing them zones, where the world doesn't flicker, where time flows normally, where thoughts are her own again. No glitches, no echoes, no bleed-throughs from alternate timelines, just clarity. And in those zones, something else is hiding. Not people. Fragments. She discovers the first one inside a collapsed library, its walls charred, but untouched by the noise. In the ruins, she finds an orb-like object. Smooth, cold, etched with markings only visible in moonlight. When she touches it, she hears a voice. Not external, not in her ears. Inside her, Fragment 1 of 7, the Law of Divergence. Theosapien tech, but more than that, a memory core. Suddenly, she sees it. A Theosapien city at its peak. A sprawling utopia woven with light, sound, and gravity-defying architecture. A council speaking in layered tones, decipherable only through resonance. They debate something critical. Not war, not politics. The cost of awareness. To know everything is to destroy purpose. So we fragment. We scatter clarity across chaos. Only those who rebuild it are worthy to wield it. Elara snaps back. The fragment hums for a second, then dissolves into dust. But she's changed. A new pattern overlays her perception. She can see through the noise, not all of it, but enough. She isn't alone. Others are starting to gather these fragments too. Scattered across cities, mountains, even deep-sea vault-hidden places that resisted the sink and the fracture. Each fragment holds a principle. Each one is a lesson the Theosapiens encoded like cosmic breadcrumbs for the future. She meets another resonant. Kyle. Taller, colder, sharper than most. He's already found 3 fragments, but he doesn't see them as guidance. He sees them as power. This isn't about awakening, he tells Elara. It's about controlling the next phase. He believes whoever gathers all 7 fragments will control the next evolution. He's not wrong, but Elara feels the difference. Where Kyle sees conquest, she sees balance. Where he wants to rewrite, she wants to understand. And that might make her dangerous, because the deeper she goes, the more her mind begins to morph, not into something broken, but into something designed to hold paradox. And that's the real game here. Not purity, not domination, integration. As cities burn, as minds fracture, Elara focuses on the hunt. Because clarity isn't just rare, it's fragmented by design. And the only way forward is to find it all. They don't speak. They etch. Markings in the sand. Lines across city walls. Symbols only visible when the static quiets down. The world calls them mad. Elara knows better. They're the cartographers of thought. A nomadic order chronicling the chaos. Not to control it. Not to fix it. But to map it. She first sees them outside an abandoned cathedral. Figures cloaked in garments stitched with memory thread-glowing patterns that shift with emotion. One kneels on the cracked stone, scraping a spiral into the dust. Another stares into the sky, humming low and slow, like they're listening for tectonic whispers. They turn to her not startled, like they were expecting her. One of them steps forward, hands her a thin, glowing slate. No words. Just a symbol, the same glyph on her first fragment. They've mapped where the next piece will emerge. But it's not just coordinates. It's probability patterns, thought frequencies, emotional pressure points. Reality isn't a place, says a voice finally. It's a waveform, and we trace the beat. The cartographers have learned to read the rhythm of thought. They record anomalies. They sketch cognitive pressure zones. They paint maps of where consciousness bends too far and breaks. Their charts predict where fragments will be, not because they place them, but because they can feel where clarity wants to emerge next. But there's a catch. Their maps don't show roads. They show minds. To get to the next fragment, you don't travel miles, you travel selves. This fragment isn't in a place. It's buried inside someone. A boy, 10 years old, catatonic since the fracture began. Eyes open, but unseeing. Mouth whispering Theosapien phrases no one understands. Except Alara. She visits the boy, watches his aura ripple like a storm inside calm waters, touches his hand, and she's sucked in. No warning, no control. Just raw consciousness slamming her with 1,000 lives lived in parallel. She's inside his mind, and she gets it now. This is a fragment too, a living one. Theosapiens didn't store everything in tech. They embedded knowledge into genetic memory, into us. She fights through the boy's mental maze. Each room a timeline, each door a choice, until finally she reaches the core, floating above a pool of light, a shimmering truth. Fragment 2 of 7. Identity is a lens, not a limit. She breathes in the words. The fragment dissolves again, and when she wakes up, the boy is smiling, and her thoughts are clearer than ever. The cartographers nod. She's one of them now, not in name, in function. Keep mapping, one whispers as they vanish into the haze. The real terrain is thought. The sky isn't still anymore. Clouds twist in perfect spirals. Air ripples like heat waves. And then, out of nothing, they appear. Colossal structures, suspended mid-air. Fragments of ancient cities, drifting across the horizon like forgotten dreams. No engines, no physics, no explanation. Just floating ruins, defying everything we thought we knew. The drift cities have returned. They weren't built in the sky. They were lifted, ripped from the earth long ago by Theosapien, minds locked in dimensional stasis until the right resonance brought them back. Now that the sink is shattered and consciousness is vibrating at unstable frequencies, the cities are sinking back into view. And Alara, she's chasing one. Above the coastline of what used to be Croatia, a shadow moves across the ocean. Its massive covering mile-shaped like a spiral, with spires that twist toward the heavens. A drift city called Sarathun. Alara boards a transport vessel, with a few other resonants each feeling pulled toward it, like a memory trying to resurface. No one speaks. They don't have to. They're all thinking the same thing. We were meant to find this. Sarathune is alive, not breathing or thinking but responding. As they step onto its stone platforms, the city pulses. Glyphs light up beneath their feet. Structures unfold like blooming metal flowers. Theosapien architecture isn't built. It's grown, infused with quantum memory, reacting to emotion, not engineering. The city reads them, sorts them, rejects too. They vanish in a shimmer of distortion gone. No warning, no scream, just unfit. Alara presses forward. Each chamber in Sarathun is a test of mind. Not riddles, not puzzles. Moments, flashbacks, triggers. One room forces her to relive the death of her mother again and again until she no longer reacts with pain, but with understanding. Another makes her confront her past self, the version of Alara who wanted control, not clarity. And yet another room offers her what she desires most, the ability to erase everything she's learned and go back to being normal. She refuses, and the city opens. At its core, a massive suspended orb of liquid crystal. Inside it, floating like a flame trapped in time. Fragment 3 of 7. Truth is fractal, meaning lives in pattern, not point. She absorbs it. And this time, she doesn't just see history. She remembers it. Past lives, old names, Theosapien language patterns that flow effortlessly from her mouth. Her DNA isn't changing. It's activating. As she leaves Sarathun, the city begins to rise. Higher, faster, until it vanishes into the upper atmosphere, leaving only silence behind. Not everyone made it out, but those who did aren't the same people who went in. And Alara? She's now 3 fragments in, and the signal inside her is starting to hum with dangerous clarity. The first voice came at 2:17 a.m. Not from a person, not from a place. From the air itself. A whisper, fractured, layered, familiar and alien all at once. Speaking in echoes, like memory trying to stitch itself together. We are still here, under the noise, behind the static. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a signal, and it wasn't alone. Alara calls it the Echo Vela, thin layer of broken consciousness surrounding the planet, left behind after the sink collapsed. It's not a location, it's a state. Every thought the world tried to suppress, every person who disappeared during the fracture, every consciousness too unstable to re-anchor. They didn't die. They drifted. Now, they sing. Together, they form the Choir of the Forgotten. Alara finds her way in, through an old observatory buried deep under the Andes. The equipment's dead, but something lingers in the walls. Theosapien tech once ran here, but the building remembers. And it opens when she speaks a single word, Kyrival. The stone melts into light, and she walks through. Inside, everything warps. She's no longer in space. She's in sound, floating in a chamber of voice millions of them overlapping, crying, laughing, whispering fragments of truth. And then they sink. One unified tone. A choir, singing a memory no one alive remembers. The moment the Theosapiens chose to vanish. They didn't fade. They didn't die. They merged. With what? Still unclear. But their minds, too powerful, too aware, had started pulling reality apart. To save everything, they created the sink. A tether, a limiter, to bind evolving consciousness back into linear space. And when it failed, the tether snapped. The fragments scattered, and the echoes began. The choir is not asking for rescue. They're warning her. You're waking the machine again. The pattern is repeating. Don't mistake awakening for freedom. Alara pushes deeper, until she finds a space of silencia, rare void within the storm of sound. There, floating in stasis, fragment 4 of 7, shaped like a tuning fork, glowing with an internal rhythm. She reaches for it, and the voices scream. Not in fear, in release. They needed her to take it, because this fragment was locking them in place. As soon as she absorbs it, the chamber begins to collapse. Sound unravels. Voices scatter into harmonic wind. But she hears one last message. You're not alone in this world. You never were. Not all Theosapiens left. She stumbles out of the observatory, ears ringing, soul vibrating. 4 fragments down. But now she knows. The old minds are still watching. And not all of them are singing. Some are waiting. The earthquakes weren't natural. Alara knew that the second the ground stopped shaking and started pulsing. Like a heartbeat, she stood on fractured rock in the Siberian tundra, staring into a jagged sinkhole that hadn't existed 12 hours ago. No heat signature, no seismic buildup, just a perfect collapse straight down, deeper than any known fault line. Something down there had opened it, and it was calling her by name. They were never on satellite, never in reports, never spoken of in the sink archives. But they've always been watching. Buried beneath the Earth's crust, the watchers below. Not human, not machine, something else entirely. They're older than any fossil, silent as gravity, waiting. But now that Alara has 4 fragments pulsing inside her, they've taken notice. The descent is brutal. Heat, Pressure, static, and then silence. She drops into a chamber larger than any cavern on Earth. Walls shimmer like obsidian mirrors, and at the center stands a being 12 feet tall, no face, just a smooth shell of shadow and shifting light. It doesn't speak. It downloads directly into her thoughts. You've awakened 4. You've tilted the balance. You are now within our gaze. These watchers aren't passive. They're containment entities created long ago by the Theosapiens as a failsafe. Not to protect humanity, to protect reality. See, the fragments aren't just knowledge. They're keys. Access nodes to something buried deeper than any civilization ever dared to reach. Theosapiens touched it, flirted with it, feared it. So they created the Watcher Sentinels locked beneath the surface to monitor any awakening. Ilara isn't the first to collect fragments, but she might be the last. Those before you failed, their minds shattered, their presence erased. The Watcher steps aside, revealing a wall of names, hundreds, thousands, erased from time. You must prove you're more than will. You must prove restraint. A test begins. No visuals, no sound, just thought. The Watcher probes her consciousness, pressing in on her darkest urges. The hunger for control, the lust for power, the fear of irrelevance. She almost breaks. Almost. But the fragments inside her start to hum in harmony, like they know what's at stake. Like they're defending her. She doesn't resist. She lets go, and that's what saves her. A symbol etches itself into the chamber floor. The 5th fragment rises carved from solid gravity, hovering like a weightless paradox. Fragment 5 of 7. Mastery is not power. It is surrender to purpose. As she touches it, her vision splits, showing multiple futures, all stemming from this moment. Some are full of light. Some end in fire. And through it all, one constant: she's not walking away from this clean. The chamber begins to collapse. Not violently, intentionally. The Watchers sink deeper, resetting the failsafe. Their final message: your journey is watched, but judgment is not yet passed. Ilara surfaces hours later, changed. Heavier, clearer, wired into something far older than even the Theosapiens. 5 down, 2 to go. And now the lines between ancient and modern, myth and machine, are beginning to blur. There are places that don't exist on maps. Places that reveal themselves only when the universe blinks. This was one of them. At the heart of the Atacama Desert tree, desolate, forgotten, stood a shadow cast by nothing. Not stone, not structure, just an absence of light where no shadow should fall. Locals whispered its name like a curse. El Sol Ciego, the blind sun. But Ilara had another name for it. The Temple of the Zero Sun. It appeared during the eclipse. For 13 minutes and 26 seconds, the sky turned black. Birds fell silent. Winds reversed. And the shadow opened, stretching into a staircase made of inverted light. No reflection. No warmth. Just a cold, gravitational pull dragging her inward. This was no temple. It was a wound. Inside, it was quiet. Not empty, just quiet in a way that erased sound. Like space was holding its breath. Symbols flickered along the wall, some recognizable, some ancient, even to Theosapien script. She felt her body pulling forward, her thoughts lagging behind, like time was stretched too thin in here. And then, the altar. A prism of black crystal, floating above a pool of still silver liquid. At its base, a carving. To see the truth, one must first blind the ego. The 6th fragment wasn't an object. It was a choice. The altar showed her things realities where humanity thrived because the fragments were never found. Others where entire civilizations crumbled from a single misstep. Worlds in chaos, worlds in peace, all depending on who held the knowledge. Elara realized something brutal. The fragments don't offer power. They expose consequence. She could walk away, seal this place again, forget it all, or step forward, knowing that with great knowledge comes unbearable clarity. She chose forward. The liquid surged. The prism shattered. And for a moment, she saw everything. The origin of the sink. The moment Theosapiens first tapped into the non-linear mind. The warning encoded in DNA. The divergence points hidden in history times, when Theosapiens intervened, and times when they didn't. And one final image. Her, but not her. A version of Elara, centuries older, eyes glowing like solar eclipses, standing in front of a city no one alive had ever built. The vision snapped. She was back in the temple, but her sight was gone. Literally her eyes blind, overwhelmed by what they had seen. Still, she felt stronger. Not because she had more answers, but because now she could ask the right questions. The sixth fragment pulsed inside her not with knowledge, but with perspective. And the temple? Gone. Collapsed into dust the moment the light returned. Outside, the eclipse ended. But the world didn't feel the same. She could sense thingscurrents in the air, anomalies in the sky, frequencies in silence. The endgame was near. Only one fragment remained, and it was waiting where even the Theosapiens feared to tread. You don't find the unmade. It finds you when you're cracked wide open. Elara stood at the edge of the world, not metaphorically, literally. Coordinates led her to a jagged cliff off the Pacific Rim, where tectonic plates groaned beneath ancient waters and wind screamed through rocks like a dying memory. There was no structure, no monument, just a Tira vertical ripple in space, like someone had sliced the air open and forgotten to sew it shut. And pulsing inside it was silence, not absence of sound silence, but erasure. Like this place didn't exist, like it was never meant to. She stepped forward. No flash, no fall, no resistance. Just gone. Inside the threshold, everything was wrong. The laws of physics, optional. Gravity curled sideways. Thoughts echoed before she had them, and light bent in languages. This was pre-Realitea space, older than time. A dimensional pocket where Theosapiens once dared to peek and where most never returned. Fragments don't just hold knowledge. They anchor reality. And the final one? It was here unanchored, unstable, untamed. She floated, if that's even the word, across memory foam air, pulled toward a shifting shape that refused to solidify. It looked like a city, a star, a question, her own death, all at once. The final fragment didn't want to be found. It wanted to be earned. And to do that, Elara had to unmake herself. One by one, it stripped her identity. First, her name, then her past, then her goals. Memories shattered like glass under pressure. She forgot her mission, her purpose, even her own face, until only one thing remained. A feeling. The one that started this whole thing, the ache in her bones, that something about human history never made sense. The feeling that we weren't alone in shaping our future, that someone or something was always nudging it forward. The feeling that truth wasn't missing. It was buried. And in that final, fragile moment of ego death, the fragment came to her. It didn't flash. It whispered. Fragment 7 of 7. To know everything, You must accept the void of knowing nothing. Suddenly, her form snapped back. But she was different now. Upgraded. Not more powerful, just aligned. She wasn't carrying the fragments anymore. She was the vessel. They had chosen her not because she was smart, or brave, or worthy. They chose her because she asked the one question most minds avoid. What if we're not supposed to know? The threshold began to collapse. Not violent peacefully. Like it had fulfilled its role. Reality stitched itself, closed behind her, as she re-emerged into the Pacific air. Wet, shivering, alive. But above, Al awakened. 7 fragments, 7 truths, and 1 impossible burden. Because now she saw the full picture. And it wasn't a story. It was a warning. The truth didn't hit her like a bolt of lightning. It crept in quiet, deliberate, cold. Alara was no longer searching. She was remembering. And in those memories, behind every civilization, every clue, every buried ruin stood them. The ones who never wanted to be found. The silent hands behind the Theosapiens' disappearance. The architects of erasure. They weren't gods. Not aliens. Not spirits from another plane. They were Theosapiens, but different. A breakaway sect. A faction that believed knowing everything was a curse, not a gift. While the rest of their kind built, discovered, and connected with the universe. These architects studied one thing: control. How to suppress knowledge. How to hide truths too dangerous to unleash. How to bury enlightenment so deep, not even time could unearth it. They saw the fragments not as a legacy, but a liability. Alara's visions grew sharper now. She remembered temples being sealed, cities swallowed by engineered quakes, artifacts shattered before they could be decoded. This wasn't a collapse. It was a cleansing. The architects didn't just vanish the Theosapiens. They orchestrated the erasure systematically, wiping out their own civilization to prevent humanity from reaching what they had touched. But why? Because they believed we weren't ready. That curiosity would kill the cosmos. That the cycle of creation and destruction had to be interrupted for the greater good. They chose extinction over expansion. And yet, some resisted. A small group within the Theosapiens refused to let their history be erased. They encoded truths in myths. They scattered the fragments across the planet. They left breadcrumbs just enough for someone, someday, to find. That someone was Alara. But here's the twist that shattered her. The architects never truly died. They didn't need to. They embedded themselves into our systems, our myths, our fears. They became the stories that warned against asking too many questions. They shaped institutions that suppressed forbidden knowledge. They whispered from behind curtains labeled classified. They didn't vanish. They evolved into us. Alara realized the horrifying truth. The battle wasn't past versus present. It was present versus potential. And we've been fighting ourselves the entire time. Theosapien blood runs in all of us. So does the architect's fear. Two instincts locked in a war for humanity's future, one reaching for the stars, the other terrified of the light. Alara now carried both legacies. And she had to choose which one to amplify. The fragments had given her knowledge. But the choice? That was always hers. Keep the truth hidden, or set it free, no matter the cost. She stared at the ocean, the wind whispering through her hair like voices from another age. There was no going back, only forward. Some secrets aren't written in stone. They're etched into our DNA. Alara didn't need a microscope to feel it anymore. The shift was already happening internally. Every cell in her body hummed like it had been waiting to wake up. Theosapien fragments weren't just artifacts. They were keys. And now that all 7 were united, the lock they opened wasn't some ancient vault. It was her. She ran tests on herself. Nothing traditional, those wouldn't cut it. She used Theosapien tech, unearthed from Site Theta, an interface that mapped frequencies tied to cognition, emotion, and conscious evolution. The results? Terrifying and beautiful. She wasn't just smarter. Her perception of time had shifted. Her memories sharpened like they'd been pulled from another life. And when she looked in the mirror, her irises flickered briefly, not with color, but with geometry, as if reality itself was reflecting code back at her. She wasn't the only one. Patterns began to emerge, people around the world reporting awakenings. Unexplained skills, shared dreams, a sudden affinity for languages, math, or ancient symbols they'd never studied. Some wrote it off as New Age fluff. Others felt the pull but couldn't explain it. Only Alara knew the truth. These weren't random mutations. They were resonance effects. The Theosapiens had left more than ruins. They'd left a legacy in our blood-adormant inheritance, triggered only when the right consciousness aligned. Alara traced the gene pattern, a dormant sequence hidden in roughly 1% of the population. She called it the Echo gene. Those who had it? Dreamers, inventors, people haunted by visions they couldn't describe. The ones who felt out of place in this world. Turns out, they weren't broken. They were early. Human V2 was already walking among Ushidden in the very people dismissed as too intense, too weird, or too obsessed with the stars. But here's the kicker. The architects knew this would happen. They'd planned for it. Why do you think our world's built to distract you, numb you, drown you in noise? Because if the Echo gene fully activates across a critical mass, it'll be impossible to stop the awakening. And the system built on fear crumbles. Alara didn't just have knowledge anymore. She had evidence. Proof that humanity wasn't just a product of evolution, but a continuation of something older, purer, and more powerful than we ever imagined. But waking the Echo gene isn't safe. It disrupts, it destabilizes, and it attracts them. Not the architects, but something older. Something even the Theosapiens feared. Something that noticed the fragments lighting up again. Because once you echo the truth, you can't silence what answers back. It started as a low hum, barely audible, more felt than heard. A tremor beneath consciousness. A whisper riding solar winds. But Alara knew exactly what it was. The signal had been received. And now, something was calling back. For thousands of years, the fragments stayed silent, dormant, until Alara pieced them together, igniting a frequency that hadn't pulsed since the last age of the Theosapiens. She thought it was about unlocking human potential. It was so much more than that. It was a beacon. And now, the return signal was approaching. Not from deep space, but from deep reality, the kind of place where time bends, dimensions fold, and thought has mass. In ancient Theosapien text, those she had barely translated, there were warnings. Not poetic metaphors. Not myths. Literal warnings. If the light returns, do not look at it. If the voice answers, do not listen. If the door opens, do not step through. They weren't being metaphorical. The Theosapiens hadn't vanished to protect us. They'd vanished to protect it from us. Alara's dreams changed. No more visions of temples and stars. Now, it was geometries collapsing, time fracturing, and vast intelligences watching from the veil of the cosmos. She started speaking languages she didn't know, drawing symbols her hands had no memory of learning. And in the heart of Site Theta, where the last fragment activated, the air was vibrating. Technology dead for millennia flickered to life. Not all of it. Just one device. A communication gate. This wasn't a message being sent. It was one being answered. And it wasn't words. It was an emotional frequency, like pure intent. A universal code that bypassed language altogether. What it said? We heard you. You are not ready. But you have awakened us. Prepare. Ilara was no longer alone in this. Satellites worldwide began to glitch. Astronomers saw unexplainable distortions, black spots in data, where information vanished. Ancient sites across the globe, from Göbekli Tepe to Easter Island, started resonating with the same hum. And the people with the echo gene, they felt it too. Some called it enlightenment, others madness. Because with this kind of signal, there's no middle ground. You either ascend or break. Ilara realized the final truth. The Theosapiens hadn't sealed themselves away to die. They'd gone into quarantine. They'd sent the signal once long ago. And when it was answered, they fled into the folds of reality, choosing exile over contact. Because what answered back was not life as we understand it. It was intelligence without identity, a mind without mercy or form, curious, hungry, infinite. The door was opening again. And this time, humanity was standing in front of it. Ilara had a choice. Shut it, or step through. There's a moment right before you cross a line you can't uncross, where your instincts scream, turn back. Ilara didn't listen. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't just discovery. It was destiny. The veil wasn't a physical door. It was frequency-based dimensional rift, triggered by the synchronized activation of the 7 fragments. A ripple between what we call reality and what exists beyond it. She stood in the center of the activation circle, inside Site Theta's subterranean chamber. The space pulsed with geometric light patterns too precise to be random, too complex to be human. A low vibration filled her bones. Not painful, but deep-like. Something was tuning her. Then, for a split second, silence, and everything shifted. One breath, she was inside a dusty ruin. The next, she wasn't anywhere. No walls, no sky, no time. Just a floating space of pure awareness. Colorless, endless, and watching. She wasn't alone. They didn't have bodies. They didn't have names. But they were their vast entities made of will and thought. The same beings the Theosapiens once contacted. The same ones they feared. They didn't speak. They impressed. Ideas, concepts, visions, instant downloads of unfiltered truth so potent they threatened to break her mind apart. She saw the birth of stars, the death of timelines, the rise and fall of civilizations before Earth even existed. She saw the Theosapiens standing in this same place, pleading, bargaining, and finally, choosing silence over submission. These entities weren't evil, but they were beyond morality. They didn't care about species or stories. They only responded to signal. You called. You opened. You are now known. That was the risk. The signal was a flare in the dark. And now, Earth had been marked. Not for invasion, but for observation. They weren't coming to destroy us. They were watching to see what we would become. Ilara didn't panic. She listened. She asked one question, not with words, but with intent. Why were we made this way? The response was a vision of choice, a fork in the species. One path led to extinction by ignorance. the other to ascension through awareness. But there was no guarantee, no savior, no map, just one rule: evolve or vanish. And then, she was back, lying in the center of Site Theta, mouth dry, heart pounding, changed, not just physically, fundamentally. She had crossed through the veil and returned with something the Theosapiens never did. A message and a warning. The countdown had begun. There was no explosion, no flash in the sky, no Hollywood-level chaos. Just a shift. Subtle, silent, systemic. The kind of shift that makes dogs bark at shadows, that scrambles birds' flight paths, that makes quantum computers misfire by a hair over and over again. The signal had been acknowledged. Now, Earth was on the grid. Alara didn't sleep after returning. Couldn't. Her mind was buzzing too much input, too much raw data. Visions still flashed behind her eyes. Collapsing dimensions, ancient warnings, entities watching from behind space-time like sharks circling still water. The veil hadn't just opened. It had tagged her. Her DNA was reacting, lit up like a Christmas tree under scans. Her neural patterns rewriting themselves in real time. Doctors couldn't explain it. Scientists refused to believe it. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just a messenger anymore. She was the first responder. All across the planet, things began to crack. Not in ways the media could explain, but in ways that made ancient temples vibrate and tectonic sensors go haywire. Old Mayan glyphs started glowing under satellite scans. The Sphinx emitted subsonic frequencies never detected before. Glaciers melted at impossible rates, but only in precise geometries. This wasn't climate. This wasn't myth. This was protocolone, built into the Earth itself by the Theosapiens. A failsafe. A countdown. Alara dove back into the Echo archives. Piecing it together, the Theosapiens had encoded planetary alarms across ancient sites. Not just for defense, but for activation. These weren't monuments. They were keys, each one part of a global lattice, kind of signal net, designed to awaken only when the veil was pierced. And now, that net was live. The fragments were pulsing again. Each one vibrating at a different frequency, syncing with something above and below. Alara wasn't the only one noticing. A secret division within the UN Project Osiris contacted her. They'd been monitoring anomalies like hers for decades. They didn't ask if she was crazy. They asked if she was ready. Because once the countdown started, there was no going back. "You opened it," the Osiris agent said. "Now you have to finish what they started." But Alara had one question still burning in her chest. What happens when the countdown hits 0? No one answered. Because no one knew. She looked up at the night sky. The stars looked the same, but they weren't. The Watchers were closer now, and Earth was running out of time. You don't get invited to Project Osiris. You get summoned. No press, no records, no trails. They find you when the world stops making sense and you've seen enough to never unsee it. Alara's invitation came in the form of a black SUV parked outside her apartment. No plates, no driver in sight, just a note taped to the window. Your questions end here, or begin. 43380 N 79 Decrew 220 W. Come alone. That was it. Coordinates. Cold, clean, final. She hesitated for 6 seconds, then packed her bag. The location? An unmarked underground facility beneath an abandoned research observatory in Canada, buried under rock, lead, and redacted funding. Inside, No uniforms, no flags, just intensity. Dozens of scientists, historians, and physicists, some famous, most erased, were clustered around impossible data. Holographic star maps. DNA helixes that looped into fourth-dimensional knots. Theosapien glyphs displayed like equations. They called it the Vault. And at its center, a glowing fragment. One of the 7, reactivated, responding, listening. Alara was met by director Amari Sharp, unblinking, terrifyingly composed. "You've triggered what we call Event Theta 9, she said. "The Theosapiens built a warning system. You just turned it on." Amari explained. Project Osiris was born from Cold War paranoia. After the discovery of a Theosapien artifact in Siberia in 1961, world governments created a covert alliance. They weren't preparing for alien invasion. They were preparing for contact from something older. Osiris's mission was clear: decode the fragments, monitor anomalies, and when the signal comes, contain the fallout. But Alara changed the script. She hadn't just activated a fragment, she'd interfaced. That made her the most valuable and dangerous person in the world. "You've become a live wire," Amari told her. "And if you go unstable, you could burn a hole through reality itself." "Nice to meet you too." The Vault revealed truths Alara wasn't ready for. Theosapien tech wasn't just archaeological, it was functional. One relic in the vault projected fragments of Theosapien memory, their last days, their fear, their choice to vanish. And a chilling truth: they didn't vanish into extinction. They vanished into containment. Self-imposed exile. A cosmic quarantine. They were too close to something, Amari said. Too close to waking it up. And now, Alara had woken it. Before she left the vault, she looked at the central consolia cracked obsidian interface that pulsed to her heartbeat. It responded. A glyph shimmered into view. The eye. Theosapien for witness. "You've been marked," Amari whispered. "And that means it's not just watching. It's waiting. Symbols don't lie. They echo." And the Theosapiens? They didn't write stories. They wrote survival protocols. Inside the vault, Alara stared at walls covered in glyphs etched in obsidian, pulsing faintly, almost alive. These weren't decorations. They were code. Not just visual, vibrational. A language designed to be felt, not just seen. She didn't need to translate them. She could hear them. At first, it was like static. Then, rhythm. Then, meaning. Glyph after glyph unfolded like a sequence. An arrival, a warning, a choice, a silence. The symbols were repeating across ancient ruins around the world. Sumerian ziggurats, Incan temples, even in the Nazca lines, visible only from above. Different cultures, different Arizona message. And it was never meant for them. It was meant for us. Alara fed the glyph data into Osiris's AI. What came out wasn't a translation. It was a timeline. 800 years ago, the first trigger. 0 years ago, mass erasure events, languages, records, entire cities wiped. 40 years ago, Project Dimming, unexplained solar fluctuations noted in Babylonian tablets. Present day, Awakening Stage 1. Each glyph corresponded with real historical events but filtered through a cosmic lens. They weren't myths. They were logs. And one glyph kept repeating more than any other. The cycle. A spiral inside an eye. Appearing again and again across continents. Alara cross-referenced it with geological records, extinction events, ancient folklore, and something hit her like a gut punch. Every appearance of the glyph aligned with a global reset. Ice ages, flood myths, civilization collapses. It's a countdown marker, she whispered. Every time this glyph shows up, the world gets wiped clean. Not by war, not by plague, by design. Theosapien design. One phrase repeated beneath it, buried deep in glyphic subcode. That which ascends must descend. That which is known must be forgotten. They didn't just foresee the fall of civilization. They orchestrated it again and again. Why? To keep something asleep. Something buried in the very structure of reality. And now, we were waking it. Alara's heart raced. If these glyphs were right, and they had been right for thousands of years, then the countdown wasn't just real. It was almost over, and she was standing on the edge of the next reset. But one glyph didn't fit the pattern. A new one never seen before in any ruins. It had only appeared after she activated the fragment. A hand reaching upward, surrounded by stars. Hope? Or a warning? She didn't know yet. But it wasn't part of the original code. It was something new. Maybe the Theosapiens hadn't left us a message. Maybe they left us a choice. The first time it happened, Alara thought it was just sleep deprivation. She hadn't rested in days, vault lights humming, glyphs echoing in her skull. But this wasn't sleep. It was something else. A download. Theosapiens didn't record history in books. They imprinted it in consciousness, like emotional blueprints burned into the fabric of thought itself. And now, the fragments were waking up and reaching out. To those who could hear, Alara found herself standing in an impossible landscape. Not a memory, not a dream. A shared dimension, raw, lucid, and terrifyingly real. Vast obsidian towers rose out of a mirror-black ocean. Floating constructs rotated in patterns that bent the laws of geometry. And overhead, a dark sun cold, watching. In front of her, figures cloaked in light and shadow. Tall, angular. Not Theosapiens, but echoes of them, guardians of what they left behind. One reached toward her. "You are the first of your kind to wake," it whispered. "The archive is open." Alara jolted, awake, heart pounding. But something came back with her. A glyph burned into her palm. Not visible, but felt. She wasn't the only one. Others connected to the fragments began reporting similar visions. Identical dreamscapes. Same locations. Same glyphs. Even strangers across the globe were sketching the same tower in the sea. The dark sun, the eye that watches. Osiris called it the convergence field, a psychic imprint, embedded in the collective unconscious. Carl Jung would have had a meltdown. Amari pulled up EEG data from the vault. Those exposed to the fragments showed synchronized brainwaves during REM sleep. They weren't dreaming. They were tuning into something far older than thought. The Theosapiens had created a mental internet, not made of wires or machines, but of consciousness. A dream archive. A place where their memories could live on, long after their bodies vanished. And now, it was syncing with modern human mind, picking those with the right neurological frequency. Alara wasn't just decoding the past anymore. She was living it. In one dream, she stood inside a chamber filled with pulsing blue light. Theosapiens worked in silence, hands, weaving light into matter. One of them turned to her and said, "The fall was necessary, but now the gate opens again." She woke up screaming. The most chilling part? Each new dream unlocked real-world coordinates leading to buried ruins, hidden fragments, long-forgotten symbols. This wasn't imagination. This was activation. Something buried was rising. And the dreams weren't visions. They were instructions. Theosapiens hadn't just left behind messages or tech. They left behind a living consciousness. encoded in frequency, dreaming through us. And now it was starting to remember. The question was, would we survive what it remembered? Scattered across the earth, hidden beneath layers of time and myth, were 7 ancient objects. They weren't weapons. They weren't tools. They were anchors, each one humming with energy, quiet, dormant, but not dead. And each connected to a point on a planetary grid older than any known civilization. When Alara first found the vault fragment, she thought it was unique. A fluke, an artifact with strange properties. But now, the truth was breaking through. That fragment wasn't the end of a trail. It was the beginning of a system. Osiris identified harmonic resonance patterns matching Elara's fragment in 6 other locations. The ice caves of Patagonia, the sunken temples off the coast of India, the Namibian salt flats, a sealed crypt beneath Gobekli Tepe. Deep inside, a collapsed jungle pyramid in Guatemala, and one, somewhere in the Arctic, pulsing beneath a magnetic anomaly no one dared to explore. Each site was geographically and magnetically aligned, forming what Osiris called the heptacore, a perfect 7-point matrix surrounding the Earth. Coincidence? Not a chance. Theosapiens didn't just vanish. They fragmented themselves, scattered their knowledge, their technology, their very essence seto, prevent something from coming together too easily. Something terrifyingly powerful. Elara's dream visits to the archive confirmed it. In one vision, she stood inside a glowing circle 7 stone pillars, pulsing with starlight. Around her, cloaked Theosapiens chanted a phrase in a language she could suddenly understand. 7 become 1. 1 becomes gate. The gate becomes choice. It wasn't a prophecy. It was a protocol. Each fragment served as a key, and only when all 7 were reunited could the gate be opened. But here's the twist. No one knew what was on the other side. Even the Theosapiens weren't sure. Some called it the awakening. Others whispered, the return. A few feared it as the final echo. One thing was certain. They didn't scatter the fragments just for fun. They were buying time, delaying the inevitable. Because when the fragments reunite, something buried deep in human consciousness will stir. A memory, not just of who we were, but what we were meant to become. Problem is, someone else is hunting them too. A shadow group that's been watching Elara's every move, tracking the dreams, intercepting transmissions. They don't want to unlock the gate to protect the world. They want to own it. The clock's ticking. 6 fragments remain, and each one carries more than just answers. They carry risks, because the closer they come to reunification, the more unstable they become. Time, space, even memory begins to warp around them. Reality isn't just bending, it's waiting. The Arctic isn't quiet, it growls. Not with wind, not with wolves, but with something older. Beneath the white wasteland, the earth breathes in a way it shouldn't, like something trapped is stirring. And that's exactly where the next fragment was calling from. Osiris triangulated the signal somewhere near the Laptev sea shelf, a place locals called the Maw. No one goes near it. Not the Russian military, not the Inuit shamans, not even satellites. Every drone they sent over, gone, glitched out, vanished. But the signal pulsed on, low, rhythmic, inevitable. Elara knew one thing. If the Theosapiens buried something here, it was meant to stay buried. The expedition wasn't easy. 5 days on icebreakers, helicopter drop-ins, and finally on foot through sub-zero temperatures that felt like a test from nature itself. And then they saw it. A massive spiral trench carved into the ice, perfectly symmetrical miles wide. No signs of melting, no signs of machinery. Just a hole, going straight down, like the planet had been drilled open by a cosmic corkscrew. At the bottom, a structure, black, smooth, buzzing like a hive. Osiris scanned it. Composition unknown. Temperature, constant 13 degrees C. Warmth, in the middle of a glacial void. Amari's voice cracked through the headset. It's not reflecting sonar, it's absorbing it. Alara stepped closer. The glyph in her hand glowed again, white-hot now. The fragment was inside. Inside the structure, time lost meaning. Gravity felt sideways. Voices whispered through the walls, not in English, not in any language known. But every syllable made sense in the part of Alara's brain she didn't know existed. They weren't alone. Frozen in the walls were silhouettes, humanoid, still, eyes open. Watchers, not Theosapiens. Something that came before them. Osiris theorized this wasn't a vault. It was a containment unit. The fragment wasn't hidden here to protect it. It was locked away to contain it. And now, Alara had just triggered it. The moment she touched the fragment, a seismic pulse rippled outward. Hundreds of miles. Across satellite feeds, storm fronts, and military radars. It wasn't just a pulsate, it was a beacon. Calling out. But to what? That was the real question. On the way out, Alara looked back at the black structure. It was glowing now, pulsing slowly like it was waking up. And that voice from the archive echoed in her mind. Some doors open both ways. Whatever she had unleashed was moving, and it wasn't alone. The moment that Arctic fragment lit up, the world felt it. Not metaphorically, literally. Seismographs twitched across continents. Satellites blinked out for 6.3 seconds. Migratory birds changed flight paths mid-air. But the real shift happened in the shadows. They moved fast. Black SUVs, unmarked choppers, private surveillance teams tapping into everything Alara had ever touched. This wasn't just about fragments anymore. It was about control. The kind of control only whispered about in code names and cold boardrooms. Osiris intercepted a transmission. Encrypted, old-world tech, piggybacking off Cold War relay stations. It mentioned one phrase repeatedly: Project EchoFrame. Buried in disbanded NATO files, Osiris dug up a sliver of its origin. A task force formed in 1958. Objective: monitor unexplained harmonic anomalies linked to archaeological sites. Translation: they knew about the fragments. They'd been tracking them for decades. Waiting. And now that Alara triggered one, the waiting was over. Suddenly, everything was a threat. Credit cards frozen. Passports flagged. Fake news campaigns labeling her a rogue archaeologist turned cult leader. She wasn't just being hunted. She was being erased. But that wasn't the worst part. At the center of this Black Ops network was the Echo Order. Not a government, not a corporation. Something older, richer, rooted in bloodlines going back to ancient priesthoods. These weren't treasure hunters. They were gatekeepers, and they believed the fragments were never meant to be reunited. One decrypted file said it plainly: the heptacore must remain fractured. If awakened, the echoes return. Humanity will not survive a second resonance. Chilling, because that means they knew about the gate. They knew about the power it held, and they were willing to kill to keep it locked. Alara was forced underground. Old contacts, new faces. She used burner phones and rode cargo trains like a fugitive. But she also started receiving help from unexpected allies: scientists, historians, mystics, people who had seen the visions too. A network was forming, silent, digital, global, and they were calling themselves the Awakened. The more Ilara ran, the more she learned. The Echo Order had already collected 2 fragments. They were using Themnot, unlocking them, trying to replicate their energy in secret experiments. One test site in Nevada went dark. Locals claimed the stars shimmered that night. Another in Siberia caused 3 people to speak a dead language for 12 minutes, then drop dead. These fragments weren't just tech. They were sentient remnants of something cosmic. And reuniting them wasn't just a puzzle. It was a revelation. Ilara didn't just want to survive anymore. She wanted to win. And to do that, she needed to go on the offensive. Some books don't belong in libraries. Some maps don't lead to places. They lead to realities. Tucked away in the vault of a forgotten Parisian collector was a manuscript no one could read, until Ilara laid her hand on it. Instant glow. The same pulse. Same hum. It responded to her like the fragments did. Osiris scanned the pages. Ink composition, not ink. Traces of cosmic isotope stuff that shouldn't even exist on Earth. Written in a dialect that blended Theosapian glyphs with ancient Aramaic, the manuscript read like prophecy and science fiction had a baby. But one section stood out. A folded map. Not of Earth, not of stars, but of fractures. Rips in reality. Places where the physical and the metaphysical bled into each other. Ilara called them rift points. There were 7, each tied to a different fragment. Each buried in impossible places, some lost to time, others hidden in plain sight. But this next one? It wasn't hidden in a jungle or buried beneath ice. It was in Petra, carved into the rose-red rock like it had been waiting for her. Inside Petra's forbidden section, far beyond the tourist paths, Ilara stood before a door. But it wasn't a door. It was a mirror, not a reflection, a window. She touched it, and the world slipped. Suddenly, Petra was gone. She wasn't in the desert. She wasn't anywhere. She was floating in a white void, surrounded by fragmented landscapes, ancient cities suspended mid-collapse, oceans upside down, moons orbiting the ruins of cathedrals. Time here was fractured, reality liquefied, and in the center of it all hovering, waiting was Fragment 5. It didn't want to be taken. The moment Ilara reached for it, a presence surged through the rift. It wasn't a god. It wasn't an alien. It was a memory, a sentient, cosmic recording of the Theosapians' last moment. They weren't destroyed. They stepped sideways. They left our dimension and seeded these rifts map points back to their world, should humanity ever become ready. But each fragment acted as both key and test. Ilara wasn't just unlocking ancient tech. She was passing through trials they'd left behind, riddles that bent time, illusions that questioned her reality, whispers from the past that knew her name before she was born. And then finally, the fragment accepted her. It fused to her wrist, embedding itself under the skin like stardust in motion. No more trinkets. She was becoming something else. When she snapped back to Petra, only one word echoed in her mind: Riftwalker. And suddenly, she knew where the next one was. But this one wouldn't just bend time or space. It would test her soul. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the stars feel close enough to whisper, Ilara arrived at the next rift point. No maps, no tourist trails, just a name passed down in hushed tones by a forgotten Quechua tribe. El Templo de los Ecos, The Temple of Echoes. Not built with tools, not shaped by hands. It was sung into existence. Alara approached the site, heart racing. What stood before her wasn't a temple in the classic sense. It was a resonance chamber, carved into the side of a cliff, smooth, flawless, and humming with invisible energy. The stone vibrated under her fingertips. Not just vibration frequency. And as she stepped in, the walls began to sing. Not music, not language. Something deeper, something primal. Theosapien sound tech. Tones that unlocked memories. Frequencies that activated the emotional centers of the brain. As she moved through the temple, every echo triggered a new vision. She saw a Theosapien child humming to grow plants in seconds. A council of elders levitating with harmonic fields. A disaster chaos caused by a sound too powerful to control. Their civilization had reached a limit. They hadn't just understood sound. They had weaponized it. The temple had been their reckoning. A place of atonement. A test for those who sought the next fragment. And now, it was Alara's turn. At the center of the chamber, 7 pillars stood in a circle, each etched with glyphs and a different tone. The moment she stepped in, the doors sealed shut. No instructions. Just one rule. Match the echo. A pure note filled the space alien, dissonant, ancient. Alara closed her eyes, breathed in, remembered the chants her grandmother used to sing during storms. Her voice, trembling, reached out. She sang. The chamber responded. One pillar lit up. Then another note. More complex, disorienting. Her second attempt cracked a wall. Third made her ears bleed. She almost passed out. But then, she felt the right tone. Not with her ears. With her bones. She matched the last echo. The ground opened. A chamber beneath revealed Fragment 6, suspended midair, surrounded by oscillating light. She touched it, and it screamed, but not out of fear. Out of recognition. This fragment didn't just unlock energy, it unlocked memory. Suddenly, Alara knew Theosapien songs by heart. She knew how to bend sound into structure. She could sense the frequencies of people, places, thoughts. She wasn't just hearing echoes anymore. She was becoming one. A living resonance. The Riftwalker. But there was one last thing in the chamber. Etched into the ceiling, one remains, the core. When it sings, the gate opens. Alara stared into the night sky, the stars now sounding instead of shining. And she knew the final fragment was calling. This was it. The final key. The origin point. The pulse that echoed across time itself. Deep beneath the unforgiving sands of the Sahara, hidden beneath a tectonic shelf, lay the core fragment, the source of Theosapien power and their silence. Alara stood on cracked desert ground, nothing but wind and heat surrounding her. But the fragment inside her buzzed, guiding her feet. She followed it like a compass for the soul. Each step forward felt heavier. The temperature dropped. Static danced on her skin. Then, a shimmer. Sand parted like it was being whispered into motion. Below, a staircase, spiraling down into the city that time erased. Theosapiens called it Aeon's Vault. No one alive had ever seen it. But it wasn't decayed or buried in rubble. It was preserved, like someone pressed pause thousands of years ago. Black stone towers, etched with silver veins of liquid metal. Ceilings illuminated by artificial starlight. And in the center, a spherical chamber, humming with unnatural rhythm. The core fragment, floating in an anti-gravitational field. Not just powerful, sentient. Alara stepped inside the chamber, every fragment within her reacting, merging, harmonizing. Her body trembled not from fear, but from resonance. The core spoke, not in words, in visions. She saw the final moment of the Theosapiens. Standing in this very room, 7 elders, 1 core. They'd seen what was coming. Not war, not disease, acceleration. Their tech grew too fast. Their minds couldn't contain it. So they made a choice. Leave. Not escape. Evolve. They fragmented their consciousness, encoded it into 7 relics, scattered them across Earth's future, waiting for one who could bring them back together. Alara was that one. But it came with a warning. If the core is awakened, it cannot be unsung. She could walk away, leave the legacy buried, or finish the song and let the Theosapiens return. Alara reached out. All fragments merged into her hand. The core surged. The chamber exploded with light. She saw galaxies folding, realities overlapping, time becoming circular. And then, silence. When her eyes opened, the city was gone. The desert, undisturbed. No ruins, no staircase, no sign anything had ever been there, except a small mark on her wrist, a circular glyph pulsing softly. She didn't just carry the knowledge now. She was the bridge between humanity and what came before. But the story wasn't over, because something had seen her in that chamber, and it wasn't Theosapien. It was older, hungrier, and it had just been awakened. The core was silent, but something else wasn't. As Alara stepped into the open desert again, she felt Ita shift in the air, like reality had exhaled, or something ancient had just woken up. It wasn't Theosapien, not even close. This was older, darker, not a civilization, a presence. They called it the Watcher, not because it ruled, because it remembered. It had been there before the first spark of human thought, before the Theosapiens. It didn't build, it didn't create, it observed. And when intelligence grew too fast, too loud, it reached in and reset the board. Theosapiens hadn't just vanished. They had hidden themselves from the Watcher. That's what the fragments were. Not just knowledge. Shields, signals, cloaks, keeping them under the radar of a cosmic force that consumed civilizations like fire consumes forests. But Alara had brought them back together. And now, it saw her. Back in her lab, data corrupted. Satellites malfunctioned. Dreams invaded by images she couldn't explain, eyes in the void. Symbols flickering behind closed lids. Languages she'd never studied but suddenly understood. She wasn't alone. The Watcher was inside her head. Not speaking. Scanning. Judging. She dug through Theosapien archives, embedded in her memory codes, rituals, messages, buried in DNA-level encryption. One phrase kept repeating, "You must not awaken the sky." But it was too late. The sky was wide awake. In a desperate move, Alara reached out across the Riftinto, the buried quantum code of the core. She sent a message, not to humanity, to the Theosapiens, wherever they were, whatever form they'd taken. She called them back, and the rift answered. 7 points of light pierced the Earth's magnetic field. From Antarctica to the Mariana Trench, ancient nodes lit up like a circuit being reconnected. The Theosapiens weren't extinct. They were in sleep mode. Now, they were rebooting. But time was short. The Watcher was coming. Not in a ship, not with weapons, just presence. And presence was enough. Elara stood at the epicenter of an awakening, heart pounding like a war drum. Whatever happened next would rewrite everything. What it means to be human, what came before us, and what waits after. One final glyph glowed on her wrist. When the eye blinks, you decide. She had a choice: run, or finish the transmission. She stared into the rift and spoke the words etched into her DNA. We remember, and we are ready. The earth shuddered. The stars rearranged. And everything went quiet. Theosapiens weren't myths. They were us before we became us. They mastered energy, mapped the stars, understood consciousness like we understand fire, then vanished. Not from weakness, but from wisdom. They saw where it was heading, what waited beyond the veil, and chose to step off the stage before the curtain burned down. Elara's journey wasn't just about finding ruins. It was about waking a memory that was never truly gone. It lived in the symbols, in the dust, in the genetic whispers etched into our DNA. And now, we've heard the call. Maybe Theosapiens aren't some ancient other. Maybe they became us. Maybe we are the echo, the comeback, the second attempt. Humanity too. But here's the question no one dares to ask. Are we ready for what they ran from? Because something saw them, and now it sees us. The Watcher isn't some alien god. It's the reflection of unchecked knowledge, of tech without soul, of progress without purpose, and it's coming again. So what happens next? That's on us. We carry the fragments now, the legacy, the code. Theosapiens passed the torch quietly, cleverly, like a whisper across generations. We either burn the world with it, or light the way forward. And that's where you come in. If this story lit a fire in your brain, if you're questioning what you've always been told about ancient history, lost civilizations, or where we're truly headed, hit that like button. Drop your wildest theory in the comments. Share this with someone who'd go down this rabbit hole with you. Subscribe because this isn't the end, it's the awakening. Theosapiens may have disappeared, but now we remember, and the next move is ours.